This interview is brought to you in association with Rabobank.
Hello and welcome to this online interview. I'm Roger Bourne and I'm speaking today with Dr. Tim Mackle, Chief Executive of Dairy NZ. Tim, welcome.
Good day there, Roger.
Tim, we spoke a little earlier this year and we were talking about a back to the future approach for pasture first systems in New Zealand's dairying. Today I'd like to talk about, I guess, what you might call the limits to growth to dairying in New Zealand, wherever they may lie. And how we can work positively with those. And one of the concepts I'd like to raise at the start is a concept that's emerging, peak dairying. We're often thinking about peak of a lot of things in the world at the moment. What is the industry's understanding of where its peak may be in a productive sense?
Yeah, it is a good question, Roger, and it's something that we have certainly reflected on from time to time, and particularly with the land and water planning processes that are happening around the country, and they're all at various stages at the moment. So, it's quite topical, and I suppose from a sort of government New Zealand perspective, it all started with the National Policy Statement on Freshwater that was put out a few years back. And one of the central tenets, if you like, of that National Policy Statement was that water bodies need to be maintained or enhanced. And so, it all kind of starts from there. And the councils, the regional councils, had to take that National Policy Statement and then give rise to that through their regional planning processes, and that's what you're seeing, as I say, at various stages right now. So I suppose you could say that question of land use, if you like, and of impacts on water is being dealt with at a regional level rather than, say, at a national level. But it stems from a national aspiration through the policy statement. As an industry, though, we want to do the right thing, and farmers themselves want to grow in the right way, and that means, we believe in some areas, that we know there's an over-allocation, not just from dairy, but from all land uses, because remember that all types of human activity contribute to nutrient and to the quality of waterways, including, of course, urban as well, and towns along the way, and so on. So in some catchments, there's an over-allocation, and I'm told by the experts that I've spoken to, and I'm not one of them, Roger, but I've been told by scientists who have been working on this for decades that many of the areas that are over-allocated in our country have been that way for quite some time. In other words, they've been problem catchments for quite a while. And they've known that, and so that's in some ways, people say about explosive growth in dairy has caused this and this. Well, actually, some of these catchments have been close to over-allocated or been that way for a while now. And of course, more nutrient and more land use of that sort of type, I suppose, can contribute to that. But then at the same time, there are other places in New Zealand where we are farming that can cope with that and are not over-allocated, if you like, on nutrient and so on. So, we do believe in some places there is definite opportunity to grow, and we hope that this kind of planning process going on will highlight that.
I would put it to you that many members of the New Zealand public would find the idea that there's room for growth in your industry very surprising and would be fundamentally opposed to it. That there has emerged in New Zealand a viewpoint that the only way is backwards. It's less of, certainly not more of. Yeah,
and that's a natural reaction. Probably, I think you're absolutely right, and that particularly people who are not close to it, but they're hearing the rhetoric in the media, and
indeed,
it's hard to refute speculation, and we hear a lot of it, and we've heard a lot of it over time. And of course, there's been various campaigns by various movements to actually draw attention to this as well. And of course, that alliteration that I won't repeat that starts with D and ends with the second word D has come up a lot as well. And that kind of thing is burned into people's minds, and it's difficult for us as the dairy industry because it's hard to shake that stuff. So look, I understand the fear that some people have who are not close to it, and that's a matter of us having a good conversation about it. But at the same time, it's just so easy to jump to it, and we saw that with the Hawke's Bay situation, Roger, where there's a contamination of the waterways. Many people got ill, and that was a terrible event for them. In fact, a person died, which is even worse. And the first thing it seemed to us anyway that people jumped to, in particular some experts in the media, even people who claim to be scientists, this is intensive farming, and then that you draw a bow and say it's dairying. Well, actually, we know that area wasn't a big dairy area. In fact, there's virtually no dairy farms, hardly any farms at all in that catchment, and yet dairy still got the blame from some people. Now, if we can get these facts across to people, the nuggets like the fact that 96% of our waterways now are fenced, 26,000 kilometres, that's a long way. 99% of stock crossings, I've got a bridge or a culvert over top of them now. There's some pretty impressive numbers out there at an industry level scale.
So, if you've got all those facts at your fingertips, but people aren't necessarily still moving from their position, you've identified that you've got a media who, perhaps gravitate towards stories that are more emotionally driven, and we come back to that fear. What changes in the dairy industry's strategy? If you're taking all the actions on farm, what needs to change in the conversation? Now, you've got various forums set up, you're identifying people who can represent your industry and have these conversations that are necessary. Is there a next step in that process?
It's probably fair to say in a candid way that in earlier years we spent much of our time making sure as an industry that we were addressing the issues. And so, we had a Clean Streams Accord. Now we've got a Sustainable Dairy Water Accord, a second version of it. And that's about having tidy dairy farms across the country. And the good news for us and for the public is that quite a lot of what's being required in these land and water plans is already being addressed by farmers. We're already some way down the track. So that's where the effort's been. But from here on in, you're right, Roger, we've got to spend more time telling the story. And as I said earlier, I think a lot of it starts with farmers, not with people like me, but actually farmers telling their story. And there's just so many good ones out there about what people are doing to play their part as custodians of land and water.
What about your dialogue with central government on this issue? And I'm not talking when you're talking about water or specific things, but is there a dialogue with central government that says, hey, look, we need to have a look at how, I guess, agriculture, but certainly dairy is being perceived, because ultimately it's a barrier to developing that sector or managing it sustainably? Have you got what do those conversations look like at a national level? Because we're all in it together. Let's face it.
That's right. Look, we've got a pretty strong relationship with the government, and it's primarily at a sort of government ministry point of view. It gravitates around Ministry for Primary Industries, and of course MB with research funding, and MFE, Ministry for Environment as well. Yeah. We work with all of them, and then the TEC on training. So there's a good a very good relationship there, I'd argue, at a high level point of view. In terms of supporting our industry, they are generally supportive, and but we also need them to keep supporting us going forward, and we know we can contribute to the business growth agenda, which is about growing our returns for New Zealand and for New Zealanders, and improving our economic prosperity and so on, and dairy can play a big role there. So we're looking forward to sitting down with them in the coming years, if you like, and working more strategically together on how we can do that, and at the same time, drive real genuine sustainability in the way we produce our food.
I'm just going to put you on the spot here. I'm going to let you imagine that you're on nationwide television and everybody's tuned in to watch. What's the question that you would most want to be asked? The question you would most want to be able to give an answer to in the context of what we've discussed here today?
I think it probably is around some form of question around what's the future for dairying in New Zealand, and has it maxed out in terms of its contribution? Because we've got some great answers as to why there's so much more that we can get from dairying in a sustainable way. And it is about driving down that value-added route, getting a lot more value for what's being produced, doing it in a highly sustainable way, and producing milk really not just efficiently and competitively, but in a really strong values-based approach way, and that's the sort of thing I think we need to instill in Kiwis, that it's been a great industry, but it can be greater again.
Well, Tim, we'll look forward as the rural delivery team to getting on farm and following some of those stories. You can guarantee that. And we really hope that we can stay in touch with you as that process plays out.
Yeah, nice talking to you, Roger.
This interview was brought to you in association with Rabobank.